Hello everyone and welcome back to our online English class. Today we are going to look at lessons C and D, clauses of reason and concession, and then D is a reading lesson. Okay, lesson C, clauses of reason and concession, on page 74 in your student's book, page 74. So we already talked about clauses of concession in lesson B. So we learned how to use although and even though. Now we're going to add a very familiar word, because. So because is a clause of reason. So as you might imagine, and you probably already understand, because gives a reason. So let's go ahead and watch this lesson.
Clauses of Reason and Concession. Unit 6, Lesson C. Contrasting because and although. Use because to join two clauses in which one gives a reason for the other. Use although to join two clauses that contrast with each other. One is surprising or unexpected based on the other. A because clause gives a reason for the other clause.
Because cable internet is fast, many people want it.
An although clause gives information that is known, followed by information that is surprising or unexpected based on the first clause.
Although cable internet is fast, many people cannot afford it.
Because cable internet is fast, many people want it.
Although cable internet is fast, many people cannot afford it.
Because Tara enjoys reading, she does well on her exams.
Although Tara enjoys reading, she doesn't like going to the library.
Because they trained hard, they got to the basketball final.
Although they played well, they didn't win the basketball final.
Because I don't have time to talk, I usually text people instead.
Although calls are free, I prefer to text people.
Check your understanding. Look at the two sentences. Pay attention to the underlined clauses. Complete the first sentence. Use because if the underlined clause gives a reason. Use although if the underlined clause gives information that is surprising or unexpected. Now complete the second sentence. Use because if the underlined clause gives a reason. Use although if the underlined clause gives information that is surprising or unexpected. Listen to the sentences.
Although cable internet is fast, many people cannot afford it.
Because cable internet is fast, many people want it.
Because Tara enjoys reading, she does well in her exams.
Although Tara enjoys reading, she doesn't like going to the library.
Although they played well, they didn't win the basketball final.
Because they trained hard, they got to the basketball final.
Because I don't have time to talk, I usually text people instead.
Although calls are free, I prefer to text people.
Okay, now I'm going to give you some time to complete the story using because or although in exercise 2A, and then I will play the audio.
Page 74, Exercise 2A.
Although Pam and Beth are sisters, They are very different. Pam is very modern. She loves electrical appliances because they are fast and convenient. For example, she loves her microwave because she can use it to thaw meat quickly. She enjoys shopping for the latest kitchen devices, although some of them are very expensive. Beth has a different attitude about modern technology. She prefers not to use electrical appliances. For instance, she never uses a microwave because she thinks the radiation is bad. She dries her clothes outside on a line because she likes their smell after they've been in the fresh air. She washes her dishes by hand because she says dishwashers waste energy. Pam doesn't understand why Beth is so old-fashioned. But although the sisters have different lifestyles, they appreciate and enjoy one another very much.
Okay, so exercise B. We're going to compare these two people, Mr. Techie and Mr. Non-Tech. So also we're going to use because and although. So let's take a look at the examples. Mr. Techie uses a smartphone to calculate because it's convenient. Okay, and then Mr. Non-Tech uses an adding machine, like a calculator maybe, to calculate, although it isn't always convenient. And also remember that you can put the because or although clauses in the beginning of the sentence as well. So you can also say, because it's convenient, Mr. Techie shops online. Or, although it isn't always convenient, Mr. Non-Tech shops in stores. Okay, so using those sentence structures, I want you to go ahead and complete sentences about Mr. Techie and Mr. Non-Tech. Okay, so exercise 3, communicate. So for this activity, you will see a conversation, and it says, ask and answer questions about the activities in exercise 2B. Give reasons for your answers. So in the example, it says, do you drive to work or take public transportation? So this is one of those A or B types of questions. So let's look at the person's answer. Well, although driving is faster, I take public transportation. Why? Because I don't have a car. Okay, so if you look at the list again, we could say, do you use a smartphone to calculate or an adding machine to calculate? Okay, or you could actually put smartphone and adding machine together and then to calculate at the end. So for example, you could say, do you use a smartphone or an adding machine to calculate? And for the second one, you can say, do you shop online or shop in stores? But in this case as well, the word shop is the same, so you can put that in the beginning and just say it once. So for example, you can say, do you shop online or in stores? Okay, so just like the first one, you don't need to say to calculate twice. You can just say it once at the end. And same thing with the next one, you don't have to say shop twice. You can say it once in the beginning. Okay, so just think about those things. And now sometimes the verbs are actually different. So of course you have to read both verbs. So the third one, for example, you can say, do you text your lunch order or bring lunch from home? So in that case, you actually need to say both text and bring because they are totally different verbs. Okay. And also keep in mind, instead of saying his lunch order, you need to say your lunch order because you're having a conversation with someone. And think about the verbs. In the case of Mr. Techie and Non-Techie, we are talking about third person singular, so we need to add S to the verb. But if we are having a conversation with someone, we don't need to add S because it's first person and second person. Okay? Now let me also make a note about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth item from the top, or we could say the third item from the bottom. It says, has prepared dinners delivered. Now, I just want to make a comment. So in this case, initially it looks like it might be present perfect tense, like have plus PP, like has prepared. But in this case, it's actually a different structure. It's passive voice. So Mr. Techie has prepared dinners delivered. By the way, delivered is spelled incorrectly. There's an extra E that shouldn't be there. So it says delivered, but it should be delivered. So D-E-L-I-V-E-R-E-D. But anyway, so in this case, prepared is not PP. It's not a past participle. What do you think it is? So has prepared dinners delivered. Okay. And in this case, prepared is an adjective. What kind of dinners? Prepared dinners. And he has them delivered. So delivered is actually, it shows that this is passive voice. Okay? So you can go ahead and practice these conversations using the A or B structure, but you can also ask information questions. So for example, let's look at the first category one more time. Uses a smartphone to calculate, okay? Or uses an adding machine. So we could say, instead of, do you use a smartphone or adding machine to calculate? We could just say, what do you use to calculate? Or if we are asking about Mr. Techie and Mr. Non-Tech, we could say, what does Mr. Techie use to calculate? Or what does Mr. Non-Tech use to calculate? I want you to go ahead and practice both forms of questions, the choice questions and also information questions. And think about what question words to use. Sometimes you might need to use what, sometimes where, sometimes how. So practice. This one might take a while, and that's fine because you can just keep the video paused and then we will look at some of those questions together afterwards. Also, I want you to take a look at the useful language box at the bottom, the dark blue box. It says use neither. You can also say neither when the answer to both choices in a question is negative. So, for example, do you drive to work or take public transportation? Now, the person does neither of those two choices. So, he can say, neither. I ride my bike. Okay? That's another common word we use when the choices do not apply to us. Okay. And also, instead of splitting this conversation up into two parts, like using the although phrase and then asking why and then using the because clause, you can just make one sentence. For example, well, although driving is faster, I take public transportation because I don't have a car. So actually you can see that I combined those two sentences into one sentence that includes both the although clause and the because clause. So that's possible too. But go ahead and take some time to practice. Okay, so let's look at the second category, shops online or shops in stores. So of course, as I mentioned before, you can just ask, do you shop online or in stores? And that's probably the best way to ask the question because you either shop in a physical store or you can shop online. So there aren't many other options. I don't know if there are any other options. So when we ask that question, we might answer, I shop in stores because I like to try clothes on. I like to try clothes on. Or you might say, I shop online although I can't try on the clothes because it's more convenient, or because I can shop at any time of the day. Okay, and then the third question, now this one, instead of giving just those two options, text your lunch order or bring your lunch from home, you might ask, what do you do for lunch? That's probably a more natural question anyway. So what do you do for lunch? Do you bring lunch from home or do you order takeout? You could also say that. Or you could say, although it takes a lot of time, I bring lunch from home because it saves money. Okay, and then the fourth category, instead of asking, do you travel by plane or by train? Because there are so many other ways to travel, like by car, by bus. So for this question, you could ask, how do you prefer to travel? How do you prefer to travel? That's probably a better question. So how, we can use how for this one. And then the next one, looks up phone numbers on the internet or uses the phone book. So even for this one, you might just ask a how question. How do you look up a phone number? Or how do you find a phone number? But look up is probably more common. Look up. How do you look up a phone number? And then the next one, has prepared dinners delivered or cooks his own dinners. Even this one, you could ask the same question for lunch. What do you do for dinner? Okay, and then uses a cell phone or uses a landline. For this one, you could ask, do you use a cell phone or a landline? But we could also ask, how do you make calls? How do you make calls? Now, of course, most people probably use a cell phone, but some people might use their computer to make calls through the internet. That's another option. So you could just ask, how do you make calls? Okay, and then the last category, you could ask, do you correspond by email or snail mail? Okay. Now, another question we could ask is, how do you send correspondence? Instead of how do you correspond? That's a little weird. We don't really say that. It's not natural. So you could say, how do you send correspondence? When you say, how do you send correspondence, you mean like, how do you send written communication? Okay, so now I want you to open your workbook to page 70 in your workbook. Okay, exercise 1, circle the correct answers. So let's look at number 1. Because laptop computers are more expensive than desktop computers, I bought a desktop. Okay, I'll give you some time to complete numbers 2 through 7, and then we will continue. Okay, so number 2. Although Mrs. Greer has a phone book, letter B, she calls directory assistants. Okay, number 3. Because shopping online is more convenient than shopping in stores, letter A, I always shop online. Number 4. Although Jessica doesn't really like modern technology, she has a cell phone, letter A. Number 5. Because Dan doesn't have much time, he usually cooks in a microwave, letter B. Number 6, although I asked a lot of questions about my new smartphone, I don't understand how to use it, letter B. Number 7, because my new car has a GPS system in it, I never get lost anymore, letter B. Now we could use the opposite clause, so instead of because, we could use although, and then switch the answer. So for example, let's look at number 7, we just finished it. It says, because my new car has a GPS system in it, I never get lost anymore. But in order to make the answer, I usually get lost, we need to change because to although. So for example, we could say, although my new car has a GPS system in it, I usually get lost. Okay, so you can see that it almost makes the sentence opposite. So for number 6, because I asked a lot of questions about my new smartphone, I understand how to use it. So then we would actually use letter A. Okay, so let's move on to exercise 2. Complete the sentences. Use although or because. So number 1, although I have a big family, we have only one TV in our house. Okay, so go ahead and complete the rest of the sentences. Okay, number 2, my father bought a digital camera, although he never used one before. Number 3, Carlos uses a laptop computer because he travels a lot for his job. Number 4, I dry my clothes outside on the line, although it takes a long time. Number 5, because Alicia wants to save money, she takes the bus to work. And number 6, we put central air conditioning in our house because the weather is very hot in this part of the country. Okay,